Parents of Reddit, what was a legit reason why you didn't let your son or daughter have that friend over or go to a sleepover? Here's what Redditors have to say. My friend and her sister could sleep at our house, but my sister and I couldn't sleep at theirs. In college I figured it out. Their house was a fire trap. Pathways between stuff like a hoarder's house. The bathtub was full of dirty water constantly. You had to move stuff just to use the toilet. The stairs to the basement, where we wolves slept, covered in clothes and only one way out of the basement. The windows were too small to crawl out of if you were larger than an average 2-year-old. Saw the inside of the house years later, and it was like a different house. They had a piano in the living room that I'd never seen before because it was just covered in hoarder crap. Oof. Living like that is hard. My best friend lived in a fairly small house, made even smaller because the entire basement was just full of crap. It was insane. The laundry room was like 6-foot mounds of clothes, and the 2 rooms beside it were stuffed floor to ceiling with junk. Oddly, the upper floor was perfectly fine. Dirty and not vacuumed anywhere near enough, but not terrible. I'd never have visited if their entire house was like their basement floor. Oh god, is this my parents' house? I never let any friend come over out of shame. Early 90s, the kids on the street decided to have a camp out in someone's front yard. Little fire, ghost stories, s'mores, tents, the whole bit. Middle of the night one of the kids starts screaming that someone is on him. Turns out another kid that just moved in had stripped down naked and smeared shit all over himself and attempted to do something to a sleeping kid. Parents all came out after hearing the screaming. Poop kid took a dump in the street and threw some at the parents of yet another kid. Again, it was the early 90s in the Midwest, so this display didn't go well. The parents went crazy. I never saw the poop king again, and his family moved away. One of our friends has a granddaughter who was treated horribly by her parents. They ignored her and just locked her in her room. When she was young, it wasn't that bad. When she came over, she would act out from time to time, but she was just so happy to be somewhere else, and you could tell. It made us feel wonderful that we could provide that, and we did so often. We tried to basically make our house a second home for her. However, as she got older, she started acting out more and more. It reached the point, when she was 7, that she was stealing money from our child's piggy bank. She got into my wife's purse and stole money. We then caught her stealing toys to take home with her. She would run around saying fuck you, fuck Jesus, and all sorts different ways to say fuck. We'd take them to the park and she would get into literal fist throwing fights with other kids. These sort of things started happening every time she was over. It went from we feel so great that we can give her a break from her troubled home life to sorry, but she can't come over anymore, and we felt awful. But she had turned into a literal terror and nothing we tried would get her out of it. The turning point was when she smacked our youngest across the head with a wooden toy and he needed to get stitches. We tried to get CPS involved, but they basically said as long as she's going to school, getting fed, and not being physically or sexually abused, there is nothing we can do. Last I heard, she is in prison for assault and drug charges. Kid has severe behavior issues and is super violent and destructive. The one and only time he came to our house, he threw all of my daughter's underwear around the room to embarrass her. The worst incident happened at school though, when he tried to choke her out. They were 5 years old at the time. I feel bad for the kid and all, and I know his mom is doing everything she can to help him, but I just can't allow that kind of behavior around my kids and in my home. I work with kids, and one of my students, 5 years old, is constantly putting his hands around other kids' necks and trying to choke them. It terrifies me. The other teachers and parents know about it, but still nothing is done. Really worried why he even knows how to do this, and that it keeps happening. Thankfully no one has been hurt as I keep a close eye on him. My daughter was the one excluded, so thought I'd add it as almost like a sap. My kid has alopecia. For those that don't know, it's an autoimmune disease that causes your immune system to treat your hair follicles as a threat. Boom. Hair loss. Hers is stress induced, and she went completely bald. Eyelashes and eyebrows too, for almost 2 years. One of her friend's parents wouldn't let her go over there because she said she didn't want my daughter to spread her disease to her kids. She said this to my kid's face. For one, that's uncalled for. She had my phone number. Call me. 2. It isn't contagious. My daughter cried for days. What an absolute bleep that woman is. Damn, that's awful. I have several chronic illnesses. If someone said that to me when I was 8, I'd be distraught too. I imagine this is well in the past, but remind your daughter that she's strong and beautiful, no matter what anyone says. Her hair started to fall out when she was 5, but she didn't get to be completely bald until 7 to 8. It finally all came back when she was 9 to 10. She turned 13 at the beginning of this year and there are a few spots that are kind of patchy, but she's figured out how to part her hair to hide it. I tell her all the time how pretty she is and how smart she is. I actually used to sing her Just the Way You Are by Bruno Mars. It still baffles me that this woman thought it was appropriate to say this to her. I no longer allowed my son's best friend to come to our place or for him to go over to his after the best friend's mom reported us to the police as harboring a runaway. This was after the best friend had been tossed out of his mom's house and told to spend the night sleeping outside, and she'd refused our phone calls to find out what was going on. So yes, I wasn't going to let a 16-year-old spend the night in 30-degree weather with nowhere to go. Sue me. The cops showed up, said she'd reported us as harboring a runaway. We explained what was happening and got treated like dirt and told that from now on we had to have full permission from the mom. Fine. We urged my son's friend to go to the police, report to them what was happening, and left it at that. The mom tried to apologize 3 days later as being off her meds and say it was okay for my son to go to their house and vice versa, and I politely refused and hung up while she was screaming at me. I'd always been kind of uncomfortable with the woman and that just sealed it. They were still friends at school, but there were no more hanging out at either one's house and I explained why, and they both agreed to the rules. The son is in the military now and doing quite well and no longer has contact with his mother. Gee, I wonder why. Sounded like a trap, vice versa. Yeah, that's what I thought too. I hated it because he and my son were part of a big group of kids that would all hang out at each other's houses all the time. And suddenly I had to worry about this woman freaking out or doing something to my son if he was over there, or accusing us again if my son's friend came to our house. Fortunately there was a third friend who this kid's mom was not mad at yet, so they'd all meet up over there. I warned them about it, and the dad who was military basically nicely asked and recorded this kid's mom consent every time without her knowledge, since we live in a one-party state. He told me, yeah, let her send my cousin who works at the PD to my house to tell me I'm harboring a runaway. We both kind of hoped she'd do it, but she got mad at one of her other sons and started a whole war with him, so I guess we were all off the hook a bit. Crazy times. My son started public school after going to Montessori school in 4th grade. I met another mom whose son started from private school the same year. My son was weird about befriending her son and I wasn't sure why. Shortly into the friendship the single mom started asking if her kid could sleep over every Friday. I was fine with that. Then it became school nights. Not so fond of that. Her son started showing up at 6:30 AM before school when we were all still sleeping. My son made other friends and just tolerated friendship with her kid. We explained that his home life wasn't great and he didn't have anyone most of the time. Halfway through the following school year the kid brought a knife to school and pulled it on my son. The school did nothing. Baltimore. So I contacted her to let her know what happened. Her response was that he was such a goof. My son was rightfully avoiding him at this point and the mom had the audacity to contact me and ask if we could watch her son for half a school week because she really wanted to go on spring break out of state with friends. She is in her late 30s getting a PhD in psychology. I had to tell her she and her kid were never going to be invited again. Her son pulls knife. His mother, oh he's just so quirky isn't he? I'm very surprised the school did nothing about the knife incident. Wow, PhD in psychology, and she would pull stuff like this? What is she doing a test on her son? He is destructive and has some unmedicated issues that affect his interaction with other kids. The kid doesn't play, he just upturns bins, throws things around and breaks stuff. My son is growing out of this kid. The kid is very sheltered and doesn't have the behavioral therapy that the doctors recommend, so he is just too much for my oldest and now my second to deal with. So that means the requests for him to come over are drying up. They really have nothing in common anymore. I had to hide Arsbarks anytime he came over after he broke multiple games and couldn't understand why the shattered CD wouldn't work and why we were mad. Damn, do the parents say anything about it? They know he has issues, he's been diagnosed, but they won't medicate. They asked my advice once and didn't like my response because I said I would choose medication and they offered therapy. They believe he is gifted and sensitive, so they shelter him quite a lot, which means he is so emotionally immature compared to other kids his age compounded with his mental problems. I'm watching my kids outgrow him because they have interest on par with their age group, and he is still at the 3-year-old range with everything. He is just a tornado. He doesn't interact. It is sad to watch this happen as they grow up. It actually broke my heart when I mentioned offhand how my kids had to turn down 2 party invites one weekend because they could only attend one party that Saturday. Also, I didn't feel like buying 3 separate gifts, and his mom said he hasn't received one party invite from one kid in his school. Your kids are the only ones who invite him over. I was sad hearing this because my kids have told me recently they can't handle him anymore.